It's always a good idea to start with the numbers because numbers don't have opinions. They just are. So, let's get the big ones out of the way for the man the world came to know as Nelson Mandela. He was born way back in 1918. He was put in prison for 27 years. 27 years. That's longer than some of you have been alive. Imagine spending your entire youth, and then some, locked away. Then, just 4 years after walking out of that prison, he became the first democratically elected president of South Africa in 1994. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993, and he passed away in 2013, leaving a legacy that is almost too big to measure. These are the stats, the headlines of an extraordinary life. Now, these facts are impressive, but they're like looking at a map without knowing the stories of the places on it. The real story isn't just that he was in prison for 27 years. It's about what a human being does with that time. Every superhero has an origin story, and Nelson Mandela's is no different. He wasn't born with a cape. He was born in a small village called Mvezo. His birth name was Rolihlahla. Rolihlahla literally means pulling the branch of a tree. Colloquially, it means troublemaker. I mean, talk about foreshadowing. His parents couldn't have known they were naming him for a life of shaking things up. At school, a teacher gave him the English name Nelson. That was a common practice at the time. But the spirit of Rolihlahla never really left him. He was destined to challenge the status quo. He grew up, he went to university, he studied to be a lawyer, he moved to Johannesburg, he opened the first black-led law firm with Oliver Tambo. The firm was more than a business. It was a frontline service. Every day they saw the brutal reality of apartheid. Apartheid dictated where you could live. Apartheid dictated what job you could have. Apartheid dictated who you could love. All of it, based on the color of your skin. In 1964, Nelson Mandela was sentenced to life in prison. He was sent to Robben Island, a windswept, brutal rock in the middle of the ocean. The stark, empty cell where Mandela slept. This wasn't just a jail. It was a place designed to break the human spirit. Prisoners were forced to do hard labor in a lime quarry. The bright glare of the sun on white rock, damaging Mandela's eyes. They were given meager rations, thin blankets, cut off from the outside world. The goal was simple: make them disappear. Make the world forget they ever existed. For a while, it seemed like it might work. The government banned his image, silenced his name. But you can't erase an idea. Inside, Mandela and his comrades turned prison into a university. Robben Island University, they called it. Debates about politics, debates about philosophy, debates about history. They taught each other to read and to write. Mandela learned Afrikaans, the language of the oppressor, so he could understand his enemy, to speak their language. This wasn't surrender, it was strategy. He fought on a different battlefield with different weapons, knowledge, discipline, an unbreakable will. After his release, South Africa was a powder keg. Decades of anger, fear, hatred. Many people, both black and white, expected a civil war. Black South Africans wanted justice, and some wanted revenge. Many white South Africans were terrified of losing their homes, their safety, their future. The country was teetering on the edge of a cliff, and into this chaos stepped Nelson Mandela, a man who had every reason to be the angriest person in the country. Instead, he chose a different path. He chose forgiveness. It was his most powerful and most unexpected weapon. He became president in 1994 after South Africa's first ever truly democratic election where people of all races could vote. It was a moment of pure joy. Lines of voters snaked for miles, old people who had waited their whole lives for this day, young people tasting freedom for the first time. Mandela's victory was a given, but his first actions as president were what truly defined his legacy. He didn't purge the old government. He invited his former jailers to his inauguration. He famously had tea with the widow of the architect of apartheid. He was sending a clear message. The past is the past. Now, we build a future together. One of the most powerful symbols of this was the 1995 Rugby World Cup, hosted in South Africa. Rugby had always been the sport of the white Afrikaner minority, a symbol of oppression for many black South Africans. The national team, the Springboks, was hated. But Mandela saw an opportunity. He embraced the team. He wore the Springbok jersey and handed the trophy to Francois Pienaar. In that moment, he united a nation of 40 million people. Nelson Mandela's influence didn't stop at the borders of South Africa. Once he had set his own country on the path to democracy, he became a kind of global elder statesman, a moral compass for the entire world. When he spoke, people listened. Not because he was the president of a powerful country, but because of the immense moral authority he had earned through his sacrifice and his wisdom. He traveled the world, meeting with kings, queens, presidents, ordinary people. He always carried the same message: peace, forgiveness, the importance of fighting for human rights. He was living proof that one person's courage could indeed change the world. His story became a universal parable for overcoming adversity. It inspired activists in Myanmar, in America, in Northern Ireland. His life showed that no system of oppression is permanent, and that peaceful negotiation is possible even in the most bitter conflicts. He showed you could be a freedom fighter without hate, and a leader without being corrupted by power. He served only one term as president, stepping down in 1999. A rare move for a revolutionary leader who didn't cling to power. He knew it was time to let a new generation lead. After his presidency, he didn't just retire to a quiet life. He started the Nelson Mandela Foundation and focused on the HIV/AIDS pandemic ravaging South Africa. For a man who lived such a public life, there are still some fun, humanizing details that often get lost behind the towering monument of his legacy. So, here are 3 little facts that might make you see the global icon in a slightly different light. First, Nelson Mandela was a huge boxing fan. In his youth, he was an amateur boxer and loved the sport not for the violence, but for the science of it.
I did not enjoy the violence of boxing so much as the science of it.
I was intrigued by how one moved one's body to protect oneself, how one used a plan to attack, retreat. It's a perfect metaphor for his political life, knowing when to attack, when to defend, and always having a strategy. Second, he was a secret gardener. During his long years on Robben Island, he fought for the right to start a small vegetable garden. After a long struggle, the authorities finally agreed. He grew tomatoes, chilies, other vegetables in a small plot near the prison walls. It was more than just a hobby. It was an act of defiance and a source of dignity. It allowed him to provide for his fellow prisoners to create something living and good in a place of death and despair. He even cleverly used the garden to hide things, like the manuscript for his autobiography, which he buried in tins among the plants. And third, there's the matter of his famous shirts. After he became president, he ditched the boring suits of a typical politician and started wearing these vibrant, colorful silk shirts. They became known as Madiba shirts, and they were a statement. They were casual, they were African, they were joyful. They broke the stuffy protocol of world politics and showed that he was a leader of the people, not a distant figure in a gray suit. That simple fashion choice became a symbol of his personality. Warm, approachable, unapologetically African. The numbers give you the frame, but the life inside that frame is where the real magic, the real lesson, is found. It's a story that belongs to South Africa, but it's also a story that belongs to the world. Think about it for a second. The man went from being labeled a terrorist by the very government he would one day lead to becoming a global symbol of peace. That's an upgrade. It's like being the guy who isn't allowed into the club, and then years later you come back and you own the whole block the club is on. His journey is a testament to the idea that the world can change, that people can change, and that the fight for justice, no matter how long it takes, is always worth it. The numbers are staggering, yes, but they are just the entry point into a story that is so much more about the human spirit than it is about political achievements. So, as we dive into his life, remember these figures. Remember the 27 years. Remember that he was 71 years old when he was finally released.